Call the meeting to order. Pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag.
United States.
To the flag of the United States of America.
And to the
To the
republic
republic for which it stands, one
one
nation,
nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Roll call.
Janet, roll call?
She might be muted out.
Okay, can you hear me now?
She goes. She was muted.
Yes, I can.
Okay. Mr. Shiskowski.
Here.
Mr. Crockett.
Yeah.
Mr. Woodward. Mr. Woodward? You need to unmute.
Try it now.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Woodward?
Okay. Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Mr. Wilcher?
Here.
Mr. Fortier?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. Wayne, do you want to say something?
Ms. Carbano has an excused absence tonight.
Okay, next thing on the agenda, approval of the minutes. Everybody get a chance to take a look at it, and I understand the ones that, I think there's one person that we're gonna talk about in a second that's new. So the content, I understand that. I've reviewed it myself for content as well as grammar, and I didn't see anything. Is there any questions on the minutes and a motion to approve if there's nothing?
Move to approve the minutes as read.
Second? All in favor? Aye.
Who seconded, please?
He did.
I'm sorry, I can't see you from here. Who seconded,
This
please?
gentleman right here, ma'am.
Okay.
Have your mic.
You got-
Nicholas
There
Shiskowski.
you go.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda, announcements. Introduce new board member Christopher Roberts. Christopher, maybe you could say a little bit about yourself?
Yes, hi, my name is Chris Roberts. I wanted to join the board to be more involved in the community and just learn more about the city of Sebastian's local government.
Welcome aboard.
Welcome.
Very good. With no questions, next item on the agenda, new business, or old business, excuse me, old business. It states there's none. I don't believe there is any. So then that would put us to new business, which kind of is why we're here. So we're talking about first, the matter of James Kyle Edwards. Wayne, do you want to go ahead and take that for now?
Yes,
Mr. Chairman,
First thing I'd like to say is there's a typo on here.
that's the
I don't
first
know, I
one.
must have had a senior moment when I was typing this up, but it's not supposed to be Mr. James Kyle Edwards, it's supposed to be Mr. Kyle Woodward.
Woodward,
Right.
yes.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
This is in regards to the City of Sebastian Certificate of Competency Number 1669. He has a Department of Business Professional Regulations Number ER 130-12850. That state license registration is null and void at the moment since 8/31/2010, and I believe it's because he didn't keep his license active at the state level either. Mr. Woodward is seeking board approval to reinstate his Sebastian electrical license, which expired on 9/30/2010 in the city of Sebastian, without having to reapply and retake the exam. The applicable code section from the City Code of Ordinances is Section 26-168C of the City Code of Ordinances, in which states in part, a certificate which is inoperative because of failure to renew shall be restored on payment of the proper renewal fee. If the application for restoration is not made before the beginning of the next fiscal year of the city, the fee for the restoration shall be double the original renewal fee. In addition, the board may require reexamination of the applicant. A certificate which is not renewed within the 3 full years after expiration may not be renewed, restored, or reinstated thereafter, except by reapplication and reexamination. We've had cases like this before come to the board. These types of cases where they're past the 3 years. The code says they need to take a reexamination. We have allowed them to appeal that to the board, basically, and the board's decision to decide whether they truly need to reapply, or if they've been in business long enough, or they've been active long enough. There's a various number of circumstances. Those of you who've been here for a while have heard them, that maybe would warrant that they don't need to take a reexamination. So we'll leave that up to the board to decide. Mr. Woodward is here on Zoom for any questions or anything he wants to add. He has his backup letter to the board. I hope you've all read that, and I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
Sir?
I got a question for Wayne.
Sir?
With regard to that last sentence in the section 26-168, how difficult would it be to get that changed?
I had a discussion with our city attorney the other day. He hasn't really, and it's my fault for not maybe bringing him up to speed. He hasn't been here for a real long period of time, but he hasn't been too involved in the construction board. As you know, we rarely meet as needed. And so I'm going to discuss this with him a little further, make sure we're doing the right thing. I mean, it has been done this way for a while. I've discussed it with previous city attorneys. I didn't have an issue with it. It felt that the board was the body that certified these people to begin with, to allow them to take their exam. This is the governing board for disciplinary actions and things like that. So this is basically an appeal to the board.
If it could be slightly altered, so that it could show that.
Yeah, we
it
could
would
look
be
at
very
doing that.
helpful.
And I
Because
think we should.
I know we've done this a number of times.
Yes, sir.
Where we've granted licensing with just all of the payments from the arrears.
Right.
But I don't like the feeling of going against the ordinance. And
I agree.
that's essentially what we're doing, although we've done it in the past. And I just think it'd be a good idea if we did get it altered to be able to do this based on an appeal by whoever would come before the board.
I agree, and I will follow up on that.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions. So, if I'm reading this right, then the testing for Mr. Woodward was done in 2003 and 2004. It looks like in 2003, there was a non-passing score of 72. And Wayne, I take it this is testing that at the time that Sebastian was doing?
Well, yeah, so Sebastian's role in this is that the board approves the applicant to take the test. They basically sponsor the applicant. Then they go to Experior, was the name of the company at the time.
Okay.
So he took his business and law exam at the end of 2003 in December, and then he took his master electrical exam in January of 2004.
Okay, I guess I'm a little confused. The item that says master electrical from 2003, it looks like, where it says fail, grade of 72. Didn't he take that twice or no?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So here's one concern that I have, and I'm not saying it's a major concern. My concern would be it took twice to pass, and I understand that, and I can appreciate that, and I'm glad that you passed. I look at that, number one. Number two, I look at what I can deduce as far as how much experience from the communication that was put forward, which I don't see a lot, and I could be wrong, but I don't see a lot there. So I take that and I ask the question of 11 years of being inactive, and we have a code that says that after 3 has to re-examine. What, and Wayne, I guess some of this I would pose back at you, what an electrical has changed in 11 years? Probably a tremendous amount, correct?
Well, electrical's not really my forte. I don't pretend to be an electrical inspector. But yes, the codes, all of the codes have changed
Yeah.
quite a bit over those years. You know, I would say the base code's the same, but there's been probably a number of changes that have occurred.
I mean, we have,
Throughout the years.
you know, for example, as an exhibit, which has, it's not even germane to this really, but we have what you provided in the packet, and there's all kinds of redlining and taking out, and so these are just changes that are coming. Has nothing to do with electrical in most cases, but my point is that and me personally, doing electrical, I consider that to be potentially dangerous. And the idea of having continuing education and knowing what's going on out there and the changes in the field, because then you learn from the people that have made mistakes, people maybe that got hurt, that maybe have been hurt. With all that said, and I'm really talking to the board now just to give my feelings out. With all that said, if you were up here, Wayne, and maybe this is a tough question for you, how would you feel about waiving the 3-year? And
I'd rather not comment. This is really a board
Okay.
decision.
okay, well then I pose it to
I have a question.
absolutely.
To Mr. Woodward.
Yes, sir.
Over this course of time, have you worked in the electrical field at all since 2010?
Yes, sir. Actually, I did. I worked for Parsons Electric off and on for 2 years doing industrial work. And until the time I got sick with cancer and other things. And that was my biggest holdup right there. But yes, sir, I have.
Have you continued the continuing education courses for
No,
this
sir, but
license?
Not the continuous education courses, but I have been studying. I actually purchased about $1,000 in books, and I've been studying the new codes and a lot on residential because that's what I specialize in. So I have been keeping up with the current code changes.
But have you have any certificates showing that you've done that?
No, sir.
All right. Are you ready to make payment for all the restitution fees?
Yes, sir.
And how about liability insurance?
Yes,
you
sir. As soon as I
secured
can
that?
get my license reinstated. Yes, sir.
And you have a local business tax account set up?
No, sir, I haven't got that yet.
Okay.
I have talked to an accountant about it, but I actually don't have it set up until I, verify my license.
So how much time do you think you really had in the field since 2010?
Probably 4 years,
All right, thank you.
3.5, 4 years.
Absolutely. Any more discussion? Does anybody have a motion? If there's no anything?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to ask Mr. Woodward about the continuing education again, just to follow up on that.
Yes, sir.
With electrical, I agree with Mr. Fortier. It's a little more intricate than painting, for instance, which we're going to look at here in a moment or two. And I can't even understand why we need a permit to paint, frankly, but that's okay, we have it.
I know.
I am concerned about the continuing education. I'm an old general contractor, and I used to bitch every year about going through the courses, which took 3 days in Fort Lauderdale. And while there wasn't a whole lot of new stuff, the administrative code is a little changed, as you pointed out, but the electrical code does change, not a lot on a yearly basis, but it does change. And I'm concerned about your having missed all of your continuing education, which I believe can be taken online as well as attending these seminars that they have around the country, the state.
Yes, sir.
There should be one coming up pretty soon. They usually happen in March or April. Have you been don't know about a continuing education course coming up or one on the internet or anything like that?
No, sir, not that I'm aware of, but like I said, I was trying to figure out where I stood with my license, and then I knew I'd have to take some kind of continuous education, but I needed to figure out where we were with this so I can move forward. That was actually one of my questions for the board was how do we pursue that, or how do I pursue that?
Which is my question for Wayne. Wayne, what, okay, because these are different, because my license is state certified through the state, it's different. So with this type of license that was done through, through Sebastian, and I understand, what typically kind of continuing education would be taken if he had kept his license up? Would he be required to take any?
Well,
Same one?
he's a state registered contractor because even though he's locally licensed, certain Class A type licenses have to be registered.
Okay.
And electrical is one of those.
Okay.
And the fact that his registration has expired with the state, I'm sure he's gonna have to address that with the state, find out, I don't know what they're gonna make him do, reapply. That would be a question that I would have, as to what did the state say? Because even if you approve it here locally, he still has to re-register his license with the state. And they may say you have to take more continuing education, I'm sure they have requirements, but the registered license is treated the same as a certified license as far as continuing education goes from each renewal cycle.
That's correct.
Did you have something, sir?
Yes, I'm an electrical license holder in the state of New Jersey.
Okay.
Every 4 years, the National Electrical Code changes.
Absolutely.
A lot of changes within that code. It's one thing to be up to date on the code by book, but it's another thing to work in the field
Agree.
and actually do it. So, personally, I wouldn't be in favor of approving this at this time.
My thing is, and I guess I'd pose this as a question, should we yield and find out what the state says first? Because the state has to supersede us. If this gentleman has to file with the state and he has to find out what they're gonna require, that's gonna supersede anything that we decide here. I mean, we could decide to reinstate it, but we won't know what the state is gonna make, is gonna have him do.
We could ask Mr. Woodward what he found out, what he knows about that. I don't know, but this is the first step. I don't think the state is gonna try to re-register him without having the local license first.
That's right. He has to get registered locally before the state's gonna do anything.
Right.
Okay.
I don't know if Mr. Woodward has asked the state what it would take to get it re-registered.
Have you, sir, Mr. Woodward?
No, sir, I thought this would be my first step, was trying to address the license issue.
Okay. For me, we have approved sometimes we have approved something like this in the past. But there was a plethora of history of, I think we had one gentleman here that had 35 or 40 years of experience. And he was still actually working for somebody. Well, that was one variable. For me, I have concerns, as this gentleman, I have the exact same concerns. I have concerns about the NEC code changing. I have concerns about the lack of time on the job because I don't really see it in writing. And I have concerns of the lack of learning what the new codes are because those codes are adopted off of sometimes people getting hurt or damage. So I really do have a concern with that. Does anybody have any further discussion?
My concern is the lack of continuing education.
I have both on I'm with this gentleman. I also have a concern of the lack of field, work since, or even prior to when the license expired. I really have a concern with that because electrical, you're talking, people can get hurt.
I look upon that frankly as riding a bicycle. You hardly ever forget how to do that. But on the other hand, the changes that have taken place over the period of time, and he doesn't have any continuing education at all, is going to set him back in getting permits and so forth. He's an electrical contractor. And that's my concern. I think, well, those of you who've been here, I've always been in favor of renewing people's licenses because I don't think they should be penalized because of the time element and so forth. But on all the occasions that we've done it in the past, and I believe you'll find, Wayne, that that's the case, we've always had people who required continuing education, such as electrical, plumbing, mechanical, GCs, and so forth. They've always had the continuing education, either online or they went to the damn seminars.
Right.
And so I, for one, as difficult as it may be, and I understand Mr. Woodward's background. I've read the letter. I know about his illnesses. I know how difficult that may be. And I've been through several divorces myself, so I don't want to go through that. And I know you don't want to do that anymore, Mr. Woodward.
No, sir.
But on the other hand, I have a problem with, I cannot frankly go along with the program.
Yeah, and if I could just real quick, if I could also talk about, the reason that I agree with this gentleman next to me is because not only just the continuing education, but continuing education is you are given by the state for these companies that do it certain little criteria, headline things that you have to expand on. But when you're actually working in the field, no, you don't want to do that now because we found out with this new electrical panel type that they're now making, you've got to, there's so much information that is gained with that. So I also am not in favor of this.
Mr. Hayward, I also understand what you've been through, and, we've all been through things in our life, but I just think that maybe a little studying and re-exam would be beneficial to the general public also.
Sir? Sorry.
I had a question for Mr. Woodward.
Yes, sir.
Were you planning on, when you get your license back, were you planning on working with somebody else or working for yourself?
Well, I've actually talked to some of my old employees and talked about getting the company back together and going back to work. So I've been talking to a couple contractors and, I've been trying to line things up the best I could. But I did have a couple past employees that are actually working on board to get back together.
Okay, and you would be leading the company?
Yes, sir. And as far back to the experience thing, I have almost 20 years experience. I've been out of the game for a little bit, but as far as there is code changes, but the actual basic install is pretty much the same, and I've done a lot of industrial work over the last, well, it's been 2-3 years, but I did a lot of industrial work. I wanted to get some experience in that before I got sick, but my experience is there. What I did was nothing but the very high-end top homes over on, Johns Island and Windsor, and I did that for years. I was in business for almost 8 years, had approximately 18 employees, so I've done a substantial amount of work and experience as far as that's concerned.
Mr. Chairman, with great reluctance, I'm going to make a motion that we deny the request for the license.
And I'll
And
second it.
refer it back to the ordinance as it stands.
Okay, 1 second, which it has been, now discussion. Any further discussion before we go to vote? Oh,
Nick Shiskowski?
the same gentleman as before. Call the vote?
Yes. Mr. Shiskowski,
To deny?
Mr. Crockett,
Same.
Mr. Wiltshire,
Deny.
and Mr. Fortier.
Deny.
It is 4-0 in denying, so the motion does not pass.
The motion did pass.
He called.
I'm
the
sorry,
motion.
you're right, the motion did pass. It is not,
His
I'm
request
sorry.
for the license is denied, is what you're saying.
yes, that's right, I'm sorry. This is the first time this has happened to me, so you'll have to pardon me. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Wayne.
Janet,
Yes?
I'm not sure if you're aware, we have a new board member, it's Christopher Roberts. I don't believe
No,
you.
I was not told that. I didn't get any list before this meeting, so.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure you know for future reference, and,
So does he need to be in the roll call?
yeah, why don't you ask him what his vote is?
Okay, Mr. Robert?
I deny as well.
Okay, so that's 5-0 in favor of the motion to deny.
Do we say anything else, Wayne? Or
That's-
do I mean, because me personally, if something was different, if this gentleman, I don't even know if we can talk about it after the fact, but if this gentleman came back and he actually had some continuing ed done and maybe was working for somebody, I would totally reconsider. I would go back down that road of considering, but that's just, that's kind of call it off the record, if you will.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to chime in on that very thing. If he can get into continuing education here in the next few months, I'd recommend that you go to the classes, get them either online. They keep a record of it. They give you that record, as you probably remember. And then you could come back here with that kind of information, and I'm sure the board might look at it a little differently.
Okay.
I would just say that if Mr. Woodward was that confident, he should just take the test again and do it.
Well, that's a great point, too. I
That's a
mean, there's
simple
always,
part.
he couldn't take it in Sebastian, but Wayne, he can take it somewhere down south, I believe.
Yes, he can, he can go to either Brevard or St. Lucie counties.
Okay, so north.
Well,
But the other thing he could do is get state certified license,
Yeah,
which would probably be to his benefit.
yeah.
can I ask a couple questions?
Sir?
Sure.
Well, the big thing is I'm in Kentucky right now, and I was, banking on getting my license so I could come home, but apparently that ain't gonna work out. If I was to get a Kentucky license, would that be, would the board consider using that as some kind of experience or continuous education or whatnot if I got a Kentucky state license, master license?
Well, if you got a Kentucky license, why wouldn't you be able to get a Sebastian license?
Well,
Because they don't reciprocate.
no, go ahead, sir.
Reciprocate.
Well, but there's almost reciprocity with certain states.
Yeah,
So he can almost cross
Kentucky and
over.
Florida don't do it.
Almost, I don't think so.
the
Not
state
They
is,
don't.
the state is pretty restrictive. I think there is some new language in the code about that, in the statutes about reciprocity. I think they've loosened that noose a little bit. And maybe, Mr. Woodward, I would suggest you contact DBPR, Department of Business Professional Regulation, or go on their website and look to see if you have a license from another location, you might be able to reciprocate it. Otherwise, I would
Yes, sir, I
suggest
already-
you go to the state of Florida and get your certified license, because that will help you. You could work anywhere in the state. You don't have to worry about letters of reciprocity and things like that. And essentially, your continuing education, everything else is going to be the same. Certified license is certainly much better than a registered or a local license. So I would,
Okay.
if I was in your shoes, that's the route that I would go.
Yeah, it's just hard to get to Florida to take the test when, I have no means of staying somewhere and all that. And Would my experience that's on file be adequate to take the test again, or do I have to come up with something else?
You'd have to look at the state's requirements, but I believe with all of your experience, you would easily qualify to take the test.
Okay, and if I get a Kentucky, the Kentucky and Florida don't reciprocate. I've already looked into that, but as far as getting a Kentucky State Master electrical license, if I brought that to the board, they wouldn't consider that as, update myself and possibly looking back into this again?
You mean here locally or with the state?
It was with the board there in Sebastian. If I bring Kentucky master license to you, a recent one, and provide that to you, would you look at that as me being up to date, as the one gentleman said, want me to be up to date on the new codes and stuff? Seeing I passed the masters for Kentucky, would the board consider using that as proof?
For the board.
Well, that's,
Mr. Chairman?
If it's
That
reciprocal,
would be very helpful, but without continuing education, I'm not going to recommend that he get the license back. The continuing education is, I think, more important. If you had a reciprocity from Kentucky, that'd be fine, and I'd look at it. But I want him, I don't know whether they even have continuing education in Kentucky or not. So you need to get the continuing education behind you.
Okay.
that's
Okay.
what I would recommend too.
Okay. Well, I'll look into getting a continuous education then.
Just one last thing I'd like to say, Jacques, what you were talking about earlier, I need to talk to the city attorney about these appeals. If someone has been denied at this point, can they come back or not? If the board's allowing them to come back, my estimation, it would probably be allowed. But I certainly need to run this past our city attorney to make sure we're not going down the wrong road here.
Well, I'd sure recommend that if you do talk to him, that you would indicate that if they are turned down, that you should be allowed to come back with either additional information.
Right.
Or some other approach to getting their license.
I agree, and just, between you and I, and I agree with that, but I certainly need to consult our city attorney to make sure we're doing everything legally. And I think especially if the board make a recommendation like that, then you should be able to, I would think that he would go along with that. But again, I want to come back to the board, but next time we have a meeting, we'll have this ironed out.
Very good.
Good.
thank you.
Okay, Mr. Woodward, do you have anything further?
No, sir. I'll just look into that continuous education and figure out where I stand on that and get that done and re-present it to the board.
Okay.
Good luck, sir.
Good luck to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Take
Thank you,
care.
gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay, continuing on with A, we're still in A in the matter of Mr. Matthew David Bauer.
Yes, this is another similar case. Mr. Bauer is seeking approval to reinstate the Sebastian painting license expired at 9/30/2012 without having to reapply and retake the exam. Same section applies, section 26-168C, with the last sentence, a certificate which is not renewed within 3 full years after expiration may not be renewed, restored, or reinstated thereafter except by reapplication or reexamination. So again, we're here to appeal that section to the board to see if Mr. Bauer indeed needs to take another exam.
In my opinion, we're talking about apples and oranges from one to what we just talked about before.
I agree.
I do have a few questions though, just to make sure that all the data is forward on this. So it was, Wayne, I guess I would pose this one to you. It was simply about just not making payment. There was no suspensions or violations or anything?
No, sir, there was no violations of any kind. Reading through his history here, I think he left the state. And this is another reason why we come back to the board. A lot of folks didn't know that they had to pay their fees even if they weren't working here anymore, or a lot of times they worked in another part of the county or in a different county, and they just they got licensed here but they never really did any work here. And that happens a lot, and that's a lot of reasons why they don't keep their licenses up. There is a small fee to just keep it inactive. Again, not everybody knew that. And this is the reason why a lot of times we want to take these back to the board, because a contractor may be active, doing his trade, but didn't necessarily keep his license up active with the city of Sebastian.
Okay.
Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes, sir.
reading over what you had here, you've been continually employed as a painting contractor
Yes, sir.
in Colorado the whole time you were
Yes,
out
sir.
there.
Yes, sir.
Does the state of Colorado require you to have a license, or is this
Negative.
a matter of a business permit? type
Yeah, you
thing?
just have to have insurance, and you don't have to have a license like Florida.
All right, and you're ready to pay your restitution fees that you have to pay?
I pay everything,
Thing?
absolutely.
Everything, you got your business permit
Everything's up to par.
up to par?
Pay my taxes, absolutely, every year. I've been in business 20 years, since 2000. And absolutely, actually what happened is we moved here in 2008 because of some things that happened. We moved here, and 2006, and then the recession happened, and I spent all this money to get my license here. I only did one job, and the whole time I lived here for 6 years. I did one job on that license, and I moved back to Colorado because I couldn't, we were broke. So then we're in Colorado, and COVID hit, and so we lost everything. I filed bankruptcy, I lost everything. We lost everything. And we bought a travel trailer, and we're living in a travel trailer, and that's why we came back here, because we don't have to heat it. So stupid. It's actually true.
Right.
It's all honest. It's all honesty.
But-
It's so stupid.
But you're in the position now to carry your liability insurance that you need?
Absolutely, yeah.
And
Yeah.
you got a local business tax account? Business
Yeah.
sales
Yep,
tax
yep,
account set
yep.
up?
Everything's good to go. My wife's all over it. It's, I got the card for you. It's Matt and Jennifer. For real.
All right, they're the only questions I have for you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman?
Sir?
Mr. Bauer,
Yes, sir.
how come you haven't got any paint in your beard?
Because I cleaned it off before I came here. I was covered in paint before I got here.
You haven't forgot how to paint, have you?
Oh, heck no. I painted today.
That's all the questions I got.
Any questions, gentlemen?
The only thing that I got is, I'm impressed with the fact that you passed a building construction test and a master electrician's test on top of everything else. I think.
Now you're just reading it wrong.
Yeah,
You're
no,
reading
he
the wrong
didn't.
one.
You're reading
I'm
the
reading the
wrong
wrong one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I don't have the master's. I've done electrician, but
It's
I
got
get
his
in
name
trouble
all
if
over
I get
it.
caught.
Well, because it's doing multiple people on it, yeah. it's,
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's confusing, because it confused me too.
I know paint. I sold paint
See,
for
it says
13
painting,
years,
and then it has master
and
electrical
then
and
I
somebody else.
put paint on for the last 20 years.
You're not the only one, that was a little hard for me.
Why you're not building houses.
Wayne, I don't see, is there any fees that he would be due, or to pay?
Well,
put
if
the
you pay
motion?
the yearly $75 fee,
Yep.
if you don't renew after
$660, I
a
think.
year, it comes out to $636 is his total,
Okay,
to bring him up to date.
does anybody wanna does anybody have any more discussion, or does anybody have a motion to make?
I'll make a motion that we approve.
Second.
But the fees, though? We wanna,
All these fees have to be paid before it's
okay,
done.
okay, let's make sure that's, yeah, we wanna make
No,
sure
but
that's
he-
in the motion.
Right.
Okay.
That's what I asked about, the restitution fees. He says,
Okay, any discussion before we call the vote? Call the vote?
Mr. Fortier, who made the motion? I can't tell from here.
I'd give her a name.
Oh, and to be honest, I don't, Nicholas?
Nicholas Jaskowski made the motion to approve.
Yeah.
And Mr. Wiltshire seconded?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right, I have that right, okay. So, Mr. Shiskowski,
Aye,
He made the motion.
yes,
Mr. Crockett,
Yeah.
Mr. Wiltshire,
Aye.
Mr. Fortier,
Yes.
And Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Motion is unanimous approval.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate
I
you coming out. Good luck to you.
You want my card?
No. Take care, though.
Thank you.
Have a nice night. So,
Good luck, sir.
moving on with the agenda. Item B, we've made it to B, recommendation for the approval to adopt the Building Officials Association of Florida Model Administrative Code, Chapter 1, for the 7th edition, 2020 Florida Building Code. Wayne, I would put that over to you, please, sir.
Yes, thank you. So what I'm bringing before the board tonight is the BOAF Model Administrative Code, Chapter 1, for your review. So to give you a little bit of background, the Florida Building Code is on a 3-year cycle, with the last code cycle beginning on 12/31/2020 for the 2020 7th edition of the Florida Building Code. With each code cycle, the Department of Business Professional Regulation, through various committees, technical advisory boards, reviews the base international code. So the current code's based on the 2018 ICC. And it's modified accordingly to meet the Florida-specific requirements and statutory-driven provisions that need to be included in the code. This is why the state is always 3 years behind the current ICC, because we have to go through this process of reviewing the code. So the state approves the version, with included in the Florida Building Code is the Chapter 1 Administrative Code. And all of the administrative requirements are written, such as when you need a permit, time limitations on permits, regulations regarding inspections, plan review, et cetera. Chapter 1, that's included in the code, purposely leaves out a lot of sections as reserved. This is by design. Chapter 1 is the only chapter in the code that was intended to be locally modified to insert language that meets the needs of local authority having jurisdiction. The Building Officials Association of Florida produces a recommended version of the Chapter 1 administration that can be used by municipalities to adopt a revised Chapter 1 by ordinance. This model has largely carried over the same provisions each code cycle with a few modifications in order to address the current need for language that provides clarification and authority to carry out the duties of the building department. So if Chapter 1 modifications are made and adopted locally, the jurisdiction has 30 days to send it to DBPR for review to make sure none of the statutory mandatory sections of the code are revised in any way. So BOAF Chapter 1 Administrative Code has gray areas where the language was added to provide clarifications. The base code can be added to, but you cannot remove any of the mandatory language of the code that is not in gray. So the City of Sebastian, currently we adopt the Chapter 1 Administration 2010 version, which was 3 code cycles ago. So each code cycle, the building official looks at the latest model, Chapter 1, to see if any significant changes have been made that warrant adopting a newer version. Under the latest code, though, there are a number of areas where statutory language regarding closing of permits and various flood provisions have been added, and this would warrant a renewed version to be adopted by the city ordinance. Otherwise, we're looking at our adopted administrative code, plus looking at the code that's in the current version of the Florida Building Code, and just to make sure that we're enforcing the mandatory language, so it needs to be updated. So if you look at this new version and included in your backup, you'll see specific language was added that was unique to Sebastian, and certain items are removed where they did not apply to Sebastian. So tonight I'm seeking board approval I'm seeking board recommendation to City Council to approve the 2020 7th edition version of the BOAF Model Administrative Code, Chapter 1. So what I'd like to do, I'm going to use the overhead over here. I'm going to go through the rather quickly, just kind of go through it all though, and please feel free to stop me at any time if you have questions about any of it. Wait for Barbara to bring it up there. All right. This is essentially the code cover page. There's some instructions in here about the code. And again, BOAF is Building Officials Association of Florida, so it's a collaborative effort of a number of building officials around the state to put this code together and add this certain language in here that's in gray in order to come up with a version that is uniform throughout the state. And you have you can modify it, but, trying to uniformity. I can tell you that when I went through this, I added the areas we needed to add, and I took out the areas where, like where permits exempt, things like that, where it doesn't apply here. But other than that, really didn't make any changes to their recommended version. So just to go through this really quick, we're not adopting any appendices. There's just, quality control, warranty, and liability. So and you'll see certain things. So this is the property maintenance section. We do have an unsafe structures abatement code adopted here in Sebastian. So this is where we insert that language in there to show that this is how unsafe structures are handled. Again, all this stuff in white is mandatory. So again, here we put in the City of Sebastian Unsafe Structures Abatement Code when it comes to existing structures. Again, where previous buildings previously occupied. Creation of an enforcement agency for maintenance. It also goes back to the Unsafe Structures Abatement Code. Records, liability, legal defenses, modifications, flood hazard areas. A lot of the code languages that did change in here had to do with flood. And there's it's a little bit here about, talking about the reviewing of the, through the floodplain administrator for applications. Any requirements not covered by the code, how to deal with that. Under 105.2, work exempt from permit. This is the area where we took out a couple of things. The first one being one-story detached accessory structures, used as tool and storage sheds, that type of thing. We definitely permit those. We're in a high wind area. I don't know of any high wind areas that does not permit those. So we struck that out. Fences, the city regulates fences. Oil derricks, I don't think we're going to have any here. Retaining walls, we do permit retaining walls. So I took that out. Sidewalks and driveways, the engineering department permits driveways. That was removed. Window openings supported by exterior walls that do not project more than 54 inches. This is like a Bahama shutter, and we definitely permit those. Again, being in a high wind area, you kind of really need to make sure these things have product approval, make sure that they're safe, they're not going to fly off and become windborne debris. The other things that we left in there, large water tanks, painting, papering, tiling, carpeting, that kind of thing. Motion picture sets, prefabricated swimming pools, less than 24 inches deep, and not exceeding 5,000 gallons. These are your small pools, wading pools, kiddie pools, basically. Shade cloth structures on nurseries. Swings, other playground equipment, those are exempt. Cases, racks, counters, partitions, cubicles, that kind of stuff in offices, we don't regulate those. Public service agencies such as FPL, that kind of thing, where they, distribution of metering or other related equipment that is under the ownership and control within that established right. Permit's not required for that type of thing. The clarification here about electrical documents, some added language in there about, the sizes. We struck this part out about the public right-of-way. I felt this was, this is on 105.3.8. This might be, I really looked at this for a while because I was trying to figure out where this came from. I'm thinking in larger jurisdictions where you have maybe a board or somebody who reviews and actually issues a right-of-way permit for any type of work that's on the exterior of buildings. We just don't have that here. You know, we work closely together with zoning and engineering departments, so I didn't see a need for us to have to issue a separate right-of-way permit every time something from the outside is worked on, so I struck that out. There's some language in here about conditions of the permit, expiration. There's, you know, little sections in here like local enforcement has the authority to deny a new permit application from the applicant for other reasons, because, so this is some of the language that was added, this section here, previous section in here, 105.2, starting there. This is, has to do with the closing out of permits. That's new statutory languages and things that were added, where owners of properties, and you know, basically if you buy a piece of property, it has a code violation, has an old permit on it, the estate has, over the last year's legislative cycle, has enacted some rules regarding that, and you know, contractors and hiring a new contractor, what liability they might have or not have. And this is just it gives you a method of being able to close out old permits easier. We run into this a lot. You know, one of the, I guess it's a statutory requirement in real estate that when you purchase a property, you have to make sure that there is no code violations on that property. So a lot of times there's old permits that are still outstanding, that are open, we got to get them closed, and you know, renewing permits, things like that. So this has set out a lot of that language on how to handle that type of thing, so that these real estate transactions can happen. And a lot of it is good. I mean, at first it was not well written. I remember when it was being proposed, but I think the final version was pretty good. You know, permits that pose no real danger, that are over 6 years old, and nothing is, you know, happened, and it's just not really a life safety thing. You're allowed to close those out without even really going and doing an inspection. Moving on. Document submittals. There was a little bit of they added some language in here about, this is for plan review criteria for commercial buildings, and they, you know, one of the criteria is for them to determine the occupancy group, special occupancy requirements. It's just a language cleanup here, just to make sure that it's in compliance with the energy code submittals, because it's you know, the two have to mirror each other. So some of this has to do with the energy code insertions throughout. Most of it is really just cleanup of the language and offering a little bit more information for manufactured homes. It gives the applicant more to go on, and it's in the code, you know, so what's required. And this chapter will be on our website. You know, if it's adopted, we'll put it, make sure it's on our website so people can see it, you know, what you adopt locally. It talks about fees, work commencing before a permit, inspections, gets into the specifics on the inspections. The language is added to elaborate on these inspections and what's actually really required, form bore surveys, things like that before the slab. Again, more on the inspections. adding some information in here, things that we typically look for, is enumerated here in the code. Most of this is, the lowest floor elevation, providing a better like definition of that, various inspections, special inspections that happen sometimes where you have unusual type of work going on, structural steel, that type of thing. We don't need a special inspector. It's not something, we're not gonna go up there and torque bolts and inspect welds, so that's something we ask for as a special inspector. And it gives the building official authorized to accept those kind of reports. Okay, so Board of Appeals, section 113 here. So I inserted, the City of Sebastian Construction Board serves as a Board of Appeals. That's also in our current code of ordinances as the Construction Board being the Board of Appeals. So it's nothing new. And a lot of this language in here, there's general and limitations on authority and the qualifications. This same language is in our current edition of our Code of Ordinances. So I did not see a need to really change this because I don't think there's any conflict there. But I just wanted to clarify that, that this is the board for the, somebody wants to appeal the decision to the building department or the building official, this is where they gotta go. Deals with some violations, unsafe structures and equipment. This is, again, goes back to our unsafe structures code, and through that process, and which those things go to the special magistrate through that code. But they've added some language in here, differences about, how you go about handling an unsafe structure, the method of service for notices, things like that. And again, that mirrors what we have in our code already. So if you see at the end here, the shaded text is BOF recommendations. The red text is for guidance, and it's removed. So the final draft will have the red will come out, and it'll just be, the things we inserted. Is there any questions about any of this?
Yeah, so just, and I probably missed it, but the regular text being in the white and in the gray, what's the delta? What's the difference between those two? The gray versus the white?
Okay, so again, you can add to this, you can't take.
But you can't take away from the white.
Take away.
By the state.
So basically, these areas, a lot of it, if you go to the base code, you're gonna see stuff like, as an example, and I don't have it in front of me, but quality control or warranty and liability, it may have that, but it'll say reserved. So a lot of it is just, it's reserved for a reason, because they don't want to get into every municipalities will maybe a little bit different, or how the state, it just doesn't, if it doesn't affect the Florida building code per se, they don't put it in there. You know what I mean? The chapter 1 is not trying to determine how you're gonna regulate things. They're gonna give you the minimum requirements.
Is, page 8, 104.8 and 104.8.1, are those new?
Let me catch up with you.
Yeah, page 8, 104.8 on the left-hand column, and 104.8.1, are those new?
Are they new?
Yeah.
No. No, that language has been in there for as long as I can remember. They may have elaborated on it a little bit. It seems a little bit longer than it used to be, but basically what it means is, if you're carrying out your duties without malice,
Yeah, I know.
you're not really held liable.
Right. And you will be defended
Right.
legally.
Right.
Okay, I just was curious about that, thanks.
And there is actually a building official's Bill of Rights, and I think that's where that kind of comes out of.
I was just curious, it was just for
Yeah.
my own edification, thanks.
Yeah, I've been down that road, I know about that.
Sorry?
I've been there, I know about that,
Yeah,
being defended.
yeah,
I have a question,
yes, sir.
can we keep this?
Yes, absolutely. You can keep anything in your packet, but if you would leave your
I'd like to
folders.
keep all of it if I can. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, did we approve the minutes of the last meeting?
Yeah, we did.
I would like a vote.
Yeah, I
I'd
was
like
just
a
gonna say, does
question.
anybody else have a discussion on this before?
Do you have, under property maintenance, do you guys do any inspections on rental properties?
Rentals?
Yes, sir. Reason I'm asking is when I was a code official in a small town in Maryland, they had rental properties and they got so bad that we had to start inspecting them because the people that owned them weren't taking care of them. And I'm just wondering if that's got anything to do with this property maintenance. You don't have an issue, then it's fine.
No, it's not part of the property maintenance code. So the property maintenance code is essentially, the base code that was used for that was the International Code's property maintenance code.
Okay.
And, which is really elaborate, and you really have to be careful what you pull out of there.
Yeah.
Because yes, they do get involved, very involved in people's rights essentially and into rental properties and that kind of thing. Our code is dealing strictly with the unsafe structures, things that are dilapidated or won't meet wind load requirements or unsafe, unhealthy, that kind of thing. So yes and no. I mean, I do get those phone calls once in a while, somebody who's renting and says, hey, my ceiling's fallen because it's got a leaky roof or whatever, and it's not that kind of code. So we really can't get too involved in those situations. It's merely a civil matter between the renter and the rentee. But at the same time, if it's an unsafe condition, really the only thing we can do, if it's truly unsafe, is to tell them that they have to leave. They'd have to vacate the property because,
Yeah.
but we really can't go after the renter, or I mean, the owner of the property
Yeah.
who is renting it out. We really don't have any authority to do anything to them other than say, hey, this structure's unsafe.
About code enforcement?
No, and it's been something we've talked about a long time with, even with the health department. There's, the limited amount of things that any one of us can do, unfortunately. But there's no real fair housing standards other than the basic standards that you have to have. Actually, you don't even need electric. But you have to have water, you have to be able to flush toilets, you have to be able to wash dishes, you have to be able to, cook
Yeah.
and clean and things like that. But in some instances, without the electric, well, then your well doesn't work. So, so it's limited is what we can do. It's always a tough situation when we get those calls.
I noticed that most of the times what it was if they weren't paying their rent. When they couldn't pay their rent, then they started complaining about the landlord.
Yeah.
So you had that mess going on too.
Any more discussion? Anybody want to make a motion? Motion?
I'll make a motion.
No, not yet. Go ahead, sir.
I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve.
I'll second.
All
Would
those
you
in
please
favor to-
identify who makes the motion and seconds it,
I'm
please?
Trying to get there, yeah. Sir, you that made the motion, your name for,
Chris Roberts.
and the second, please identify.
Nick Szyskowski.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Call the vote.
Mr. Szyskowski,
Yes.
Mr. Crockett,
Yeah.
Mr. Wiltshire,
Yes.
Mr. Fortier,
Yes.
and Mr. Roberts.
Yes.
Thank you. It's unanimous.
Thank you.
Okay, with no more discussion and now having the vote, building official matters, it says none,
None. I do have one matter.
please.
It's Mr. Roberts' birthday today. Wish him a happy birthday.
Today's your birthday?
Not quite yet.
So he was good enough to come in and attend the meeting with us.
Excellent, thanks. Let's see, attorney matters, we have none. 15 minutes to the, nobody that's here, the public. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn? Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Who made the motion and
Yep.
who
Nick
seconded
Siskowski
it?
made the motion to adjourn.
Second. Who was
Thank
this?
you.
Yeah.
Everybody leave their